Hey YouTubers, and welcome back to another Saw or Jigsaw discussion video. Today, we're going to be talking about what I believe is just the absolute worst scene in the entire franchise. And you know what? It's just better to show you.
Don't you fucking move. Next time, you shoot first.
So obviously that scene is from Saw 3D. If you haven't seen it in a long time and just wanted to give you some reference to that, and also it's not the entire clip, I obviously edited it down for YouTube purposes, but I'm going to be going over why exactly I hate this scene. Recently, I did an interview with David Hackle, the director of Saw 5. He also served as a second unit director for Saw 3 and 4 and the production designer for 2, 3, and 4. So anyway, guys, in that interview, I talked about, even though he gets a bad rep for Saw 5 and everything that movie kind of did for the franchise, I think one of the things he did very well was balance Costas Mandylor's character of Mark Hoffman throughout that film and showcased him not as the cold-hearted killer that he would eventually become in Saw 3D. And I'm not against that. I think it's one of the best things about Saw 3D, even though I feel like that's the weakest film in the franchise. No, I like the fact that he is kind of morally ambiguous throughout that movie. It's made pretty clear throughout the first couple of films that Hoffman's been introduced in that he's not a cold-hearted, cold-blooded killer. He is in fact the type of person who was taken the same way that John was, and even Amanda, kind of ripped apart into shreds by the world and all the unfairness in the world with the death of his sister from Seth Baxter. And he took that knowledge that he knew about the Jigsaw killings and how they were done and all his own personal knowledge and made it seem like John was the one who killed Baxter, giving him the cathartic kill that he needed, but also allowing him to get away with murder. And even John says when he meets him, "You're not a killer. You're not going to sit here and kill me, even though it would be completely justified. I've kidnapped you. You're a cop. You've been looking for me." Like, nothing would really blow up in his face if he would do that besides the blackmail that John put under Hoffman's nose. You know, if you kill me, all this information will go out and people will know you're the one who killed Seth. And so obviously that's why Hoffman had to help John. And one of the reasons I always just believe that Hoffman kept helping John and doing all the work in Saw 6, even though John had already died. And he was even saying in Saw 6, how many different times are there going to be? You know, you're dying. We all know that you're going to die. How many more games could you possibly have in mind? And that's one of the things he was doing in Saw 6 was just finishing up the games. And one of the reasons it seems so real, in my opinion, that he was leaving, he was never going to do any more John-centric stuff, but he was just simply using all of this stuff to get back at Jill for having mangled him in the last film. So yeah, that's the way I've always perceived it. Hoffman was not a killer. He was a person driven by the circumstances that kind of surrounded him, and he kind of fell down the rabbit hole when it came to John's legacy. He was doing it very much because, one, he somewhat enjoyed it. Like John said, it's a way for you to sleep at night. You know, you've done this whole cop thing for years. You know it's a revolving door system. This is going to allow you a reason to actually keep going, and you're going to see my method is actually true. But I also don't think that he is a killer. Yes, he becomes that way. He uses this method in order to get what he wants, but there's a part in Saw 3D that makes you believe that, yes, even though he just did this, he went on this rampage and he became somewhat of a slashing monster, he was actually going to leave it all behind when he blew up everything and was ready to leave and pack up. So this scene, I think, throws an entire wrench into that, though, because we're not exactly sure when it takes place. And the only reason it's in this movie at all is because this movie felt the need to introduce Gibson. And Gibson's one of the worst characters in the entire franchise because he is completely unneeded. It would have been better if this was Fisk's character, who is already pre-established in the canon and somebody we already know is close to Hoffman, so it would have been a much more interesting dynamic between those two. But because they had to establish Gibson, they had to establish a relationship between Gibson and Hoffman, they had to add this scene in order to give Gibson that good guy mentality against Hoffman's obviously evil character, and this was the best way to do it. Of course, because the movie revolved around Hoffman being somewhat of a slasher villain, it made sense to make him look like a monster, killing an unarmed man who simply attacked Gibson, but it wasn't isn't a death sentence. That to me just doesn't fly, and it doesn't work with Hoffman's character. We don't know when this takes place. This could take place after Saw 3 and 4 because Gibson does say that Hoffman gets a promotion, and that's the last time we actually get to see Hoffman get a promotion. Plus, it looks like he's in a suit. He's not in like a cop uniform, but we've seen him in a suit dealing with flashbacks with Rigg in Saw 4. So obviously he's been a detective for a long time, and we're not even sure what he's talking about getting a promotion, whether it was after 3 or somehow this happened 5 or so years ago. This is the moment that brought Gibson to Internal Affairs, and it's the thing that put them in butting heads throughout this film. So really, honestly, I'm not sure. I can't tell you when this scene takes place, but a lot of people, myself included, tend to believe that this takes place sometime before the major events of the series, sometime closer to when Officer Rigg was not part of the SWAT team and Hoffman was helping him out against Art Blank during the flashbacks in Saw 4. Instead of around Saw 3 and 4 and 5, we would get to see Hoffman actually getting a promotion after the whole Gideon meatpacking plant thing. So yeah, this to me is a really bad scene because it really spits in the face of a lot of Hoffman's character development. Granted, it's not really that big of a deal because if the way you're going to see Hoffman's character is a little bit sympathetic is if you actually really like the franchise and you're willing to actually look at it in a different perspective. Obviously, from the moment he's introduced, Hoffman is supposed to be the bad guy. But if you can look beyond that and you can see what they're trying to do with the character, especially in those early films like 4 and 5, he is a little bit more sympathetic than it would come off in this movie or in just in general the entire franchise. So what are your thoughts on this, guys? Like I said, I absolutely hate this scene. I hate it so much. I wish it wasn't in the film, and technically every time I watch it, I somewhat skip this scene. I already know what's going on here, and I don't really need to see it in order to make me believe that Gibson is the good guy in this movie because that's just the way that it was built from the very beginning. So yeah, I don't like it. Anyway, guys, for more of these videos in the future, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Tell me you want more Jigsaw discussion videos, and I'm going to do my best to get them out there. Hope everyone's having a fantastic day. It's been real.